Hello.
Hello. Tony, you still have it backwards. So, oh, I think we got it now. No,
It's still backwards?
Oh, yes, it is backwards. Yeah. Tony, you need to go, when you go to choose virtual background and you see the little pictures that you can pick from, look at the very bottom of that screen and it says, I have a green screen, or then it says
Yeah.
mirror my video. Yeah, click on that.
Okay, so I'm looking at my tile. You see me?
hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Are you? I will, to me, it looks like it's up correctly, Yvonne. It looks correct to you, or it still looks
It's still back.
reversed? I'm sorry?
It's still reversed.
So I'm gonna uncheck mirror my video. What about now? What about now?
It's still reversed, so I'm not sure how to fix it.
I just unmirrored.
That was my best guess, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Maybe there's a different issue then.
Could
Sorry
be.
about that. Not able to help with any other ideas.
I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
Well, welcome to the ones that we have here this afternoon for this second day on our Zoom Hispanic Leaders Group. I am so happy that you're here and joining us. Today we have a wonderful panel and we're excited that you to hear your opinions, and please use the chat at all times to communicate with us. I'm going to be pretty much muting everybody except the panelists and of course our wonderful interpreter that it is here present. Thank you so much. He's waving at you. That is Vic. It comes from all the way from Texas, and we are so happy because he's an expert on this. And we are just very happy to be able to provide. We talked so much about language access, and we are happy to be able to provide to all of you this opportunity where all people that need the language of Spanish is accessible to them too. And all I want to remind everyone that when talking, and I will repeat this again as people join us, because we got a couple more minutes, that please pace your speech. If you do have to, and this is to the representatives that are joining us, if you have to use, if you're referring to, let's say, a legislation, HG, whatever, do it at a pace that our interpreter can actually do it, because again, it is very difficult for him to maintain the same, since this is simultaneously done. It is difficult for him to be able to maintain that pace and trying to decipher the numbers that you just rattle off, because it is, again, it is difficult. So please keep in mind that we don't want you to change much of how you talk because we have an expert here. But at the same time, if you are referring to some legislation or numbers in a row, and it just happens to me, like when I'm in church, they say, "Oh, you were going to do him such a judge," and they go, blah, 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 and I'm like, "Oh, what did you say?" I just lost it. It's just the same thing. And I'm like, okay, paste that when you're mentioning numbers. So I would appreciate that, again, that you use the chat for communicating. And I think we got Tony here, and I'm gonna let him take over since he's back.
I'll just say thank you very much, Maria. I couldn't have said it better. I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. And yes, you do not have to speak a lot slower than normal. Just maintain a regular speed. But yes, when you're using acronyms, or when you're using House Bill 345 or HB, whatever, or Senate this and that and the other, then it is a little bit more complicated. And just do keep in mind that when you go from English to Spanish, Spanish tends to be like 25% longer than English. So I have to keep up with anyone that's speaking. So thank you very much, Maria.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here and helping us. We got a couple of minutes before we start. So again, we are very excited that you are here. And I'm gonna and Vic, are you ready to take on? Do I need to do anything else?
Yes, will you please, and I just forgot, please remind them, especially whoever is speaking, even if you're bilingual, you will have to select, it's better if you select the language of your preference. Interpretation is enabled already. So if you can select your language of choice, even if you're bilingual, if you're speaking, because if you don't select it, then you and I will be competing against each other. So, and whoever's listening will be listening to both of us more or less. And what the Zoom function does is whoever's speaking, their voice is silenced in comparison to mine for those that are listening to me in the other language. Not for the people that are listening to you in your original language and prefer whether it's English or Spanish, but for people that are listening in the other language, it'll minimize your voice and it'll amplify mine so that they can listen to me in the interpretation. That's all. Just make sure that you do select a language channel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. So is it 3 o'clock yet?
It is 3 o'clock.
Hi, I'm Tony Maldonado, Chairman of the Hispanic Leaders Group, and I want to welcome you to our 21st Annual Hispanic Capital Day. This year, because of the pandemic, we're doing it virtually through Zoom.
Antonio, I'm going to interrupt you.
Antonio,
I need to interrupt you. I have not been assigned as an interpreter. Can someone assign me? So I'm not able to interpret yet because I would be speaking over you as I am right now.
Okay,
so
Maria.
Once I'm assigned, I will go into my channel and nobody will hear me.
And as we are doing this, I would appreciate it that everybody on your icon at the bottom, you have, it says interpretation. Please go to that icon and select your language of choice, Spanish. And I would appreciate all the speakers to be able to definitely secure or do only English. And the moment that you switch to Spanish, of course, you are competing with our interpreter. So I would appreciate it that everybody at this moment goes to the icon at the bottom where it says interpretation. It's to your right. Click there, your language. And this includes myself that I need to do that because when I'm speaking to you, otherwise I will be competing also with the interpreter. Thank you so much.
I haven't been assigned yet.
Tony, please continue.
No,
Okay.
I'm not assigned yet. I'm not assigned yet. If you are having problems with it, you can give me the hosting privileges. I can assign myself and then I can send it back to you.
Okay, let's do that.
Meanwhile, while they're doing that, I apologize for isn't technology great? When it works, it's awesome. When it doesn't, it's a little frustrating. So
Yeah.
bear with us for a minute or so, and then we'll get this show on the road.
Go ahead, Antony.
No, I'm not assigned yet. I am not assigned yet.
Yes, you are.
No, I am not.
You
I
are
am not.
your co-host.
Oh, no, you need to put me, you need to give me the hosting privileges and then I'll be able to assign you. You need to give me the host. As a co-host, I cannot do it. Got it. And you just give me a second, please.
We just piloted this yesterday, so this is why it is a little complex to get it all. And yesterday we were able to assign him perfectly, but you know, who knows?
Okay, I am on it. We can begin and I will, as soon as I start,
We
I
are
will
assigned,
give
so
it to
you
you.
are welcome to start, Tony.
Okay, well, here we go again. Welcome to our 21st annual Hispanic Capital Day. This year, we're going virtual with Zoom. And of course, we love the technology. But anyway, I'm going to give you, for the sake of time, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the program. We're going to try to run the program for about an hour. But of course, if someone wants to stay a little bit later and have some burning questions and burning desire to share, I am willing to stay a little bit over the hour. We're going to have the presentation participation type format. We'll have a main speaker that will address our delegation and the panelists. Then we have an opportunity for our panelists today to ask questions to that speaker for a period of about 3 minutes, and I'll call on you by turn. After the panelists and the main speaker have a dialogue, and then the rest of the delegation will be able to ask questions of the panelists and the main speaker. Today's topic is going to be legislative issues and redistricting. Our main speaker today will be Representative Dan Shaw from Missouri District 113 Imperial. He's voting and information for legislators. Today, I'd like to introduce the panelists to you. We have Representative Maggie Nuremberg, Missouri District 15, Kansas City. We have Angela Mosley, Senator Angela Mosley, Missouri District 13. We have Representative Jay Mosley, Missouri District 68. One tidbit about Senator Mosley and Representative Mosley. Yes, they have the same last name, and they are Missouri's first ever married couple to serve in the Senate and the House of Representatives at the same time. So kudos and congratulations to them for that great historical event that they have and they share. And they've shared with us, they happen to be in my district, and I am very proud of their accomplishments. The legislators will address 1, key policy issues that affect their community. 2, how are they engaging the Hispanic community? And then we'll have an overall general questions from the audience. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dan Schultz from Redistricting. And Representative Shaw, please feel free to take over right now. Unmute.
There we go. How about that? Technology is great. One, I want to thank you all for allowing us to speak today. It's great that we can meet this way. I'd rather meet in person, and several of you, I believe I've seen in the Capitol this year, and I look forward to seeing you again in the Capitol next year. Elections and redistricting, I'm chairman of both. The regular standing committee elections and elected officials has been busy this year. We've done many bills in regards to initiative petition reform, and we've also done a couple on photo ID and some other election type fixes that, in my opinion, would ensure our elections are fair, transparent, and trustworthy going forward. But I think really those things have happened over years, and there's nothing really new election-wise. We're just trying to get things done that we've been trying to do for a couple of years. Photo ID is one of them, as well as paper ballots, ensuring that the paper ballot is the official ballot of the state of Missouri, to make sure that there's a way to go back and audit the election process. What we saw in the last couple of years with elections is people want to make sure that they can go back and make sure the math was right. I believe our elections in Missouri have been very good, but I don't want to get in a position where we don't trust them in the future. So I support that. Photo ID, I've always been a supporter of photo ID. I come from a district that's very highly supportive of photo ID. And I believe this body will continue to, and probably later today, continue to ensure that photo ID is the next standard. There's arguments on both sides of the issue, but I believe this body today will most likely pass photo ID, at least perfect the bill, and then come back either at a later date to send it to the Senate. What I think is probably the most interesting and probably the most asked question I have, though, is that other committee that I'm chairman of congressional redistricting. And the key word there is congressional. There are several types of redistricting take place this year. There's the local redistricting that in your local communities may need to be taken place by ordinance or by charter that is based on the census. There's also the Missouri House that has to be redistricted, and also the Missouri Senate. And those are both done by commissions that were appointed by the governor. And if you would have asked me at the beginning of this process, which ones would be passed, which ones wouldn't be, it's nowhere close to what truly has happened. What has happened is the House Commission has agreed on all 163 districts, and those districts are in place. So those who registered, filed for election 2 weeks ago, they know exactly the district they're running. The Senate Commission was unable to come up with the Senate map. So that's currently in court, and we expect at some point that the courts will come back with the Senate map. So there's people that have filed for the Missouri State Senate, not knowing exactly where those districts are. It is my hope that the courts would deliver that before filing closes on the 29th. And that is something that we as legislators have absolutely no control over. It's out of our hands with the commission, and now with the Senate, it's with the courts. The congressional redistricting, completely different story on how that process works. There's a committee in both the House and the Senate called Congressional Redistricting Committee. And they both operate just as any other committee would in their respective bodies. The congressional redistricting bill is just like any other bill. I pre-filed a bill for redistricting. It went through the committee process, went through the floor process, and is now, we passed it out of the Senate, out of the House, is now in the Senate. That's how that works. And then once both the House and Senate agree on the same language, it would go to the governor for signature. That's the simple part of it. But let's get into what has truly happened and how we got to where we're at. When the census came out, the apportionment was that Missouri would retain 8 members of Congress. We currently have 6 Republican and 2 Democrat. We went through the process of the census, realized that the first district, which is St. Louis City, and part of St. Louis County. Congressional District 1 lost some population, so it was going to have to gain some population, about 50,000 people. The Boot Heel, the Congressional 8th District, lost 50,000 as well. So it's going to have to find 50,000 more people to balance out. So the easiest way to describe this is we have 8 congressional districts. They all have to be within one whole person of population. The Missouri House and Missouri Senate maps have a deviation, but it was our interpretation that the congressional maps have to be within one whole person. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to balance this out. The other thing with congressional redistricting, congressional district number 1 is a voter rights district, VRA district, meaning that it must remain a minority majority district. So that puts a little bit of interesting twist on what you can do with the first congressional district. So what we did when we drew this map is looked at communities of interest, and we drew a map that I thought was fair. The members of the House thought was fair, and we sent it to the Senate. Now, what I will tell you about the map, a couple things, and then I'll quit talking. We drew a map that was 6-2, 6 Republicans and 2 Democrats. It kept Emanuel Cleaver in the 5th Congressional District in Kansas City, kept Cori Bush in the Congressional District 1 of St. Louis, and maintained the other districts as Republicans. But if you look at it, I think it's a very good map. It kept communities of interest together. We made some changes after it was sent into committee to make sure some communities of interest stayed together. And I think we did a fairly good job of it. I can answer more specific questions if people have them, or as Tony, but that's how it worked. It is now sitting in the Senate, and they continue to talk about it. And I hope that they're able to come to a vote, bring it up and vote on either the map we sent them or a version that they feel is fair, and we'll take it from there. But that's the overview of congressional redistricting, and that's the best I can do in 3 or 4 minutes or less.
Representative, you actually had, since you were the main speaker, you actually had more time to go over some of the things.
All day about it, Tony.
You actually have more time. We just wanted, when the panels address you, that they are limited to the 3 to 4 minute time to give the rest of the panel some time. By the way, side note, I got a message from Senator Mosley that Representative Jay Mosley is in session, so he may not be able to join us. So if he does, it'll be towards the tail end. So now we just picked up another 3 minutes. As Hispanic Leaders Group is a nonpartisan group, when we have our conference and our advocacy day in Jefferson City, we go as nonpartisan to have open dialogue with our state governor, his cabinet, and state officials. However, there are issues that affect our community, as you might imagine. One of the things that I will not do today is take sides on any issues, but facilitate the conversation so we can have a clear conversation and have a great dialogue. So having said that, if there's anything else you'd like to say or clear up for us in terms of redistricting, now is a good time.
Well, Tony, I can go into a little bit more detail on some of the issues with the map that we sent to the Senate. Congressional District 2 was a concern of many. One, the St. Charles County split, but also how we would treat CD2 if it would be able to remain in Republican hands late into the decade. That was a concern by many. Another concern was we have 3 military bases in the state of Missouri, 2 of which are incredibly important, and Rosecrans is important as well. But Whiteman Air Force Base, home of the B-2 in central Missouri, then a little further south in Fort Leonard Wood is the other Army base. Those two had been in Congressional District 4 before, and that is now a vacant seat because Congresswoman Hartzler is running for U.S. Senate. So when we looked at it, that, and historically, those two bases had been in the same district. We chose to split them up, one to remain in the 4th and the other to go in the 8th Congressional District, which is currently held by Congressman Smith. Although we cannot draw districts based on the outcome of a future election, I personally thought that if we put Fort Leonard Wood in the 8th Congressional District, it was very possible that it would have the chairman of U.S. Budget Ways and Means Committee as its member of Congress, and would certainly protect it from any BRAC closures in the future, base closures, that type of thing. And it would also provide that same type of protection for Whiteman as well. So that's why we had split those two. That was that has become a little bit of a disagreement as we've went. But all in all, what we've tried to do is make sure that most of the congressionals were happy with what we did with the congressional map. But as we know, they don't get a vote on what their district looks like. That's what the Missouri House and Missouri Senate get to do. And we're in the middle of that process now. I would hope that it is able to get a vote and go to the governor's desk at some point, rather than us risk the opportunity of the courts interjecting. And there's also a question of whether the courts could or could not. I would rather avoid that question altogether and just agree on something and send it to the governor. So that's kind of where we're at, Tony. It's better if I answer questions rather than just keep rambling on that, but I could also answer questions on anything else. So.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you, Representative Shaw. Okay, so now I will turn to the panelists, and I will ask Senator Angela Mosley if she has any questions for you to address you for 3 to 4 minutes. You can unmute, Senator.
I currently do not have any questions regarding the redistricting maps. The maps are over here in the Senate currently. We have not come to an agreement as of yet. And there's are supposedly coming back up this week. Not sure when, what day, but supposedly the maps will be coming back up. And hopefully we will vote it out. I have no questions.
Well, Senator, if I could congratulate you on getting your bill passed last year, and I apologize for your husband not getting his bill passed last year.
Oh, it actually was his bill.
Oh, that's right. He hasn't reminded you of that, has he? I told him that'd be bad for his health.
I don't mind. He had been trying for 3 years, so I was okay with his going first.
Yes. Senator Mosley, since you didn't have any questions, we'll come back to you on so that you can give us a little bit of spiel on your priorities for our district and for your constituents. Next, Miss Maggie Nuremberg. I hope I pronounced that right.
You did.
My name is Maldonado, and a lot of people butcher that name, and I'm so sensitive about butchering other people's names, so I apologize if I didn't pronounce it correctly. But go ahead if you have questions.
Yeah, that's correct. So I have a very strong German last name. My husband's family is from, everybody speaks German in his family, but he and his grandparents only spoke German until that was essentially taken away from them during World War II and the fear of being associated with the Nazis. So it's kind of interesting today in where we stand in terms of the world and with everything going on. Certainly my mind is in thoughts and prayers are really with the people of Ukraine and what they're going through. And one of the things I just wanted to share, since I haven't been with this group before, so I appreciate you having somebody from the other side of the state on to talk with you. So just briefly about my background. I represent Kansas City in the Northland and the city of Gladstone. Before I came to the House, I was an educator for 13 years, and I had a really diverse set of experiences. So I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador, and hablo español, pasé 2 años allá. And the interesting thing about being in Ecuador is when I was there, everybody says, my name is Maggie. But obviously Margarita, Maggie, and then I come back here and everybody really struggled with saying Nuremberg. And I said it was a good thing as a teacher in Ecuador because you're called by your first name and not your last name. So when I went back to teaching in the United States, I was just called Miss N, which was easy for a lot of my students probably. But I have a diverse experience of education as well. So I taught journalism, I taught Spanish, and I taught ELL. So I also taught adult ELL. So one of the things I really enjoyed was working with a lot of our Spanish speaking folks in our community. And it was just really a pleasure to work with them and some of just incredible opportunity to learn with them. And sometimes I say that I think I learned more from them than I ever taught them. So that's a little bit of background there. But I currently serve on the budget committee, as well as elementary and secondary education and children and families. So I just wanted to respond to a couple of things real quick. The budget committee this year has a lot of work because in addition to doing just our regular fiscal year 23 budget, we're also working with a lot of the federal stimulus dollars. So we have about a $47 billion state budget that we're currently working on. And following spring break, we will hopefully move on that a little bit more quickly in terms of our federal ARPA dollars. But last week, making sure that I'm right in saying this, yes, just last week, we finally passed our emergency supplemental, which was really key to get a pay raise for state workers out the door, as well as about $2 billion in emergency relief for our school districts. And a lot of that really is deemed towards, in addition to COVID mitigation, really focused on learning acceleration and helping to make up ground that was lost during the pandemic. So that was certainly a win for a lot of folks across the state. In terms of addressing the congressional redistricting, we have two functions as a state legislature, and that is to pass the annual budget as well as to pass congressional redistricting. So anything else in terms of legislation really is on the back burner for the most part, because those are the two things that have to be done. So I commend Representative Shaw in really working well in the process in the House, especially. And I think looking at where the Senate is today, we can really look at the House as to how well they were able to do that. But I have the opportunity to address this, so I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that he said as well. It is important to recognize that we've maintained the two congressional districts that are currently held by Democrats, but also to remind folks that in the state of Missouri, we have essentially a 60-40 electorate in recent statewide races. So 60% being Republican majority, or essentially has received 60% of the vote, and Democrats have received 40% of the vote. So in an 8-seat map, that would be equivalent to having 5 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So it's hard to predict the future and what may happen, but we can look at how quickly the pendulum swung one way or the other in the state of Missouri. For a long time, Democrats had power, and then it fairly quickly switched. And so just being really aware of the changing demographics and what that might mean for the future. But just really being aware of, that's where we currently stand today. And if we could predict the future, then we would obviously be very rich in these things. But I think it's just important to continue to be cognizant of that. Two things I wanted to say real quickly about education. There's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of renewed interest in education. And one of the things that I think it's really positive that we can all get behind are really looking at parents and guardians' rights in education and what their in terms of transparency in the school process. I think there's a lot of good to be said with that. Some fears that I've had and concerns that I've certainly voiced in the committee process is what we are doing in terms of tying the hands of educators and really being able to practice their craft. So I think important to what I've done in terms of being both a Spanish teacher and an ELL teacher is making sure that we're always very real and authentic in addressing our students and current events that are happening. So I've had some concerns and ongoing concerns about if some of the legislation that we've seen that could really tie the hands of educators and not being able to fully embrace honesty in education or fully embrace truth in teaching. So those are some of the things that we will continue to follow closely as bills move through the process.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us today, and thank you for that clarification. This is your first time with the Hispanic Leaders Group in our Advocacy Day, and you've done great. We hope that there are more years that when we do go to Jefferson City, that you can participate with us again. I did have a question before I asked the next panelist. In your budget yesterday, one of our delegates had asked a question about the language in the budget where it dealt with immigrant students that grow up, they study elementary school, junior, high school, but and then when it's time to go to the university, they have to pay foreign student tuition. Is that anything that that has to do with that work that your department does in terms of budget? And is there a movement from legislative these days to change that a little bit? Because it just affects, Missouri is surrounded by 7 other states and they're stealing a lot of our students because of that policy that we have to make especially DACA students pay foreign tuition.
Yeah, great question. You know, that's one of the things we've seen in recent years is that language attached. Again, being aware, and I certainly had students who graduated as the valedictorians of our of high schools where I've taught. And the fact that they've gone through school 12, 13 years here and then asked to pay that international tuition in Missouri just wasn't feasible. And so that's where we saw students go to other states. And so they were able to go across the border to Kansas and given full rides for their academic achievements here. And so I think really being aware of our population that we are serving, and especially if you have graduated from a Missouri high school, especially students with honors, I really think that we have to be aware and making sure that they are just like any other Missourian. And so I've pushed back against that language. I'm not sure what we're seeing this year, but it's something that we will be following closely. And again, being very aware that, you know, sometimes students can live in this country much longer than they were ever in their native country. In fact, and this isn't just students from Latin America, but really recognizing, you know, we have in the school where I used to teach, we had speakers of 100 different languages from many, many different countries. Sometimes they don't even know their native country or where they were born. They don't even know that they've lost touch with those languages. And then they've been through and they've had incredible academic achievements. I really hope that we can do something here to make them feel not just welcome, but just really valued as both as somebody who you know, should be in our Missouri universities, but then being a member and a productive member of the workforce and society here in Missouri as well. So we'll continue to follow those language amendments closely.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So now I'd like to open a discussion with the rest of the delegates that are online. And the format would be that you would put your question in the chat and Maria Yasich will go to the chat and pull the questions and we'll ask the questions. You can direct your question to a panelist or ask any panelist to answer that question. All right, so Maria,
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have a question here from one of our participants, and her question was, let me find it, I just lost it, it's technology again. How will the proposed redistricting impact the Hispanic Latinx community?
I believe that question would be to me, Representative Shaw. What we did was, is we went through this map and drawing of the map, we tried to make sure that any communities of interest were kept together. And that was really our first and foremost mission, was to make sure that communities of interest were together. Not only Hispanic communities, but also the Bosnian communities and other communities, rural versus urban. We tried to look at all those to make sure that we kept communities of interest together and also drawn a fair map for the state of Missouri. So I don't think the congressional map will have a drastic negative impact on any one minority group or any specific group. I think we did the best job possible we could have keeping communities of interest together.
Thank you. Thank you. And other question that we received is, how can we achieve that the redistricting does not hurt the population involved?
I think with us, it started, let me make sure I understand the question. How do we make sure that the population isn't hurt while we drew through the map, correct?
Yeah.
Well, I think the approach we took in the House to get House Bill 2117 to the Senate was that we looked at communities of interest, we looked at population growth and decline, and did what was the best for the state of Missouri rather than what was politically in the best interest of everybody. I came into drawing the map with no agenda except drawing what was best for the state of Missouri. I did want to see Jefferson County, my county, be kept whole. Other than that, we really looked at the map for what it was worth, for where people were, where the growth was, and we tried to have the least amount of impact we could on the most amount of people. And I think we did a pretty good job. I mean, there's always going to be armchair quarterbacking, and I've looked at hundreds of maps since we've passed ours, and I hope to be able to vote on one or go to bill signing of the governor soon. But we'll see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. What do you mean by communities of interest, and how are those groups determined?
Well, I think you can look at demographics. You can look at certainly the Hispanic community. If there's a group that we want to keep those together, the Bosnians certainly as well. African Americans, we looked at that, keeping communities of interest together. But it's just not race in that. It's also where we urban versus rural. Does it make sense to have one of the maps that was proposed on the House floor had people from South Kansas City in a congressional district with those in Branson. Well, let me explain that again. There was a map that had a congressional district in Kansas City, South Kansas City, all the way down into Branson. Branson, Missouri, where all the tour buses go to watch old country music. I don't know that there's much communities of interest between South Kansas City and Branson. There's a map now being proposed that I saw that had Blue Springs, Missouri, in the same congressional district as all the way down to the Arkansas border. I don't know that Blue Springs has the same issues that Wright County or Texas County have with farming and wood harvesting in the Mark Twain National Forest. those are communities of interest. You're trying to keep people that have same interests together, not necessarily political interests, but just the same interests. Jefferson County, where I live, is much different than Kansas City. Hannibal's different than Springfield. So what we try to do is keep people that all viewed things the same way, that all had interest in agriculture together, people that had interest in manufacturing together, people that had, the river districts. We try to use the rivers as geographical barriers. A lot went into this, but that's what I'd consider communities of interest, people that have the same interest. Not to overthink it, but just simply communities of interest.
And how do you find those community of interest? Like when we're talking about Hispanic, just an example, we are spread across. I mean, we can't really say this is where the Hispanics live, because the reality is we are all, we're one of those few entities that we don't get in one little area. We are pretty spread out across. So how did you arrive to that?
Well, and that is exactly what we found when we drew the map. And when we draw the map, we have all the census data, all the demographics from the census. And when you fill out the census, there was all those different types of person you could choose: white, non-Hispanic, African-American, all these American Indian, all these different things. And we are able to look at that to help us. It's multiple layers on a map to see where things are at. And that's what we used. And we also used we had 8 congressional hearings on congressional districts in the House, where we invited people from each district in on a different meeting to talk about what was in their area, what their communities of interest were. So we took not only what was in the census data, we took what was also delivered to us in hearings last spring, and we also took in the members of the committee opinions on what they viewed the communities of interest. And we've also listened to countless public testimony as well. Conversations just like this telling me, this is what we should do. You should pay attention to this. Ray County was a big thing, where half the town of Ray showed up at our hearing here, and they wanted to be kept in one county. Okay, so we looked at that and figured out a way to do it. So I think we tried to do the right thing. I think we did, and we did pay attention to all these different data points. It wasn't just Representative Shaw's opinion on what the communities of interest were, where the minorities were, where they weren't. We tried to look at all levels of data to come up with the best map we could.
Thank you. We'll get another question to all the panelists. And what is the status of the Medicaid expansion in Missouri?
So Medicaid, well, a couple of things. First of all, we have funded the expansion population, and one of the things that we are seeing in an ongoing concern is the wait times surrounding those new enrollees. So this has definitely been flagged both by the press and a lot of folks here within the building, of really just the excessive wait times, and how this truly is an unconstitutional wait, much like that is happening right now. So last week we were at an almost 100-day wait time for an application to be processed. The concern with that is you can be reimbursed for expenses for the previous 3 months if you are enrolled in Medicaid. But again, when we're even exceeding that, there's a lot of people who are not receiving care. So with that being said, I think even the department, MoHealthNet, they're really looking at this and working to expedite that by bringing some additional folks on board. Hopefully now with the pay raise and all those different pieces in place, they'll be able to start processing the applications much faster. But Medicaid expansion continues to, I guess, be the law of the land, if you will. We waited for a long time, almost a decade now, and with all the different pieces in place, finally, the Supreme Court ruling last summer, we are funding Medicaid, the expansion population. There are measures there that we heard, even one last week or the week before, to tie the expansion population to an annual kind of annual approval of that piece of the budget, as well as work requirements. So we'll continue to see how that plays out. But right now we are, Medicaid expansion is there, and we encourage folks to look into it. And if you are having or if you are aware of people who are struggling for their application to be processed, please reach out to your state representatives or senators, and we can help you with that process as well.
Thank you. Slightly over 3 million votes were cast in Missouri into 2020. There are 2 cases of voter fraud. Only 2 cases were found of voter fraud, both in St. Charles County. Why restrict the rights to vote when the system already works?
I'm assuming that question would be to me since I'm the elections chair. It's a great question. And I think when you're talking about restricting, I think the person asking the question was referring to photo ID. I think there's a couple things, one to think about. We found two unsuccessful cases of voter impersonation or voter fraud were caught. Were there any that were not caught? I don't think we report successful voter fraud, because if we were to vote or report successful voter fraud, it would no longer be successful. I think that it's important that we as Missourians trust the system, have faith in this system. And like I said earlier in my opening comments about photo ID, I think it was over 70% of the people in my district voted for photo ID when we had it originally. So that is why I support it now, because I believe I'm supposed to represent the people of my district, and I believe that most people have access to photo ID. If they don't, we can go through the process of helping you. You contact your state representative if you don't have the documents, and we can help you get those and secure those. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that we as Missourians trust the system. If there's a certain population out there that doesn't believe the system is being trusted, then I think we need to take that appropriate action. And that's why, as chairman of elections, we've passed some of the election bills to ensure that the next election, we don't have the problems or the situation that come up in other states, and that we can still remain a state that only has 2 reported cases of voter fraud, so that we don't become a state that has multiple cases. So I think we're doing the right thing, but we might disagree on that as well. So
I have 2 more questions related to what you just said. And one of them is, why not change the system? And how many people in Missouri do not trust the system? The reporting system, I'm sorry. Why not change the reporting system?
Well, the reporting system, I don't know that we could change the reporting system, because no one says that I committed voter fraud. I think it'd be very hard to change that part of the system to say, yes, I committed fraud, but I still want my vote to count. Pardon me, there's a train going by. I apologize if you can hear that. But the other question was, what was the other question? I'm sorry.
The other question was, how many people in Missouri do not trust the system?
Well, I hear it all the time on my emails I get, wanting tighter election and more election integrity. I think if you listen to the news, depending on what station you listen to, you hear that. And if there's a small population that believes that we have some issues, I think they deserve to be heard. And in most of the cases, I think we can do some fixes to ensure that everyone votes count. Every person's vote counts the same, and that we have the transparency, the trustworthiness in a fair election system.
Any alternative facts? Alternative facts.
What's that?
Alternative facts.
I think there's, for every fact, there's also a flip side to that, just like 90% is good, except for the 10% it's not. I think alternative facts is a new way of saying I disagree with you. The thing is that I hear consistently from my members in my district and throughout the state of Missouri that they want election integrity is a large issue, probably one of the top 3 issues in their issue category, so to speak. And you know, we could always argue alternative facts. I'm willing to listen to everyone, and I know there's one person on here that we've had some great battles in committee with, and I respect everything she has to say. I hope she respects me. And you know that at the end of the day, we're trying to do what's best for the state of Missouri.
Thank you.
I know we're short on time, but I wanted to jump in here just to respond to a few things that Representative Shaw said. You know, one of the things he led off that part with is just how important it is that we all have trust and faith in our elections. And I couldn't agree more with that. I think as an elected official, I want to make sure that all of our votes are counted, and at the end of the day, whoever wins, wins, right? So I certainly agree with all of that. One of the things that I see in a lot of the legislation and the legislation that's being pushed across the country is that we are really in search of those cases of fraud. And a lot of this is what I have seen is legislation in search of a problem. When we have a Republican Secretary of State who certifies all of our elections, and you know, how our election process works is it's at a very local level. So it's our local election authority. And then essentially they have to certify all of those votes that are cast there at the county level. And then after that, it is our Secretary of State that essentially signs off on certifying all the elections. We have seen very few cases. My understanding was there were 2 of fraud out of millions of votes casted. And my fear in requiring more and more layers is that we make the accessibility to voting so difficult that fewer folks show up at the polls. And so one of the things that a lot of us have pushed is that expanded early voting, having other ways to be able to vote. And if that's in person, expanding that window out a little bit, because right now our requirements are so strict. But I really struggle with tying any of those to the photo ID requirement, when what we've seen at the state level is that it is so difficult to access vital records. So we had an 8 to 10 week backlog in just our vital records department of our Department of Health and Senior Services. And so that was for somebody whose name, for example, was spelled wrong on the birth certificate of the baby, or a parental affidavit that has to be signed by both the mother and the father in order to have both names on the birth certificate if that couple is not married at the time of the birth of the baby. There was an 8 to 10 week backlog on even those type of situations. And so I really struggle with anything that is going to make it more difficult for folks to access elections. So I just needed to put that out there, just a counter argument. But yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I'd like to address Senator Mosley again, so that she can address the Hispanic community here on this call with some of the things that, as a senator, she is working on to improve her district.
Okay. Well, one of the bills that Jay and I are working on is a broadband bill that would make broadband available to everyone that is underserved or can't afford it. My bill number is S as in Sam, B as in boy, 1199. So that's one of the ones that we're working on this year together to help not only the Hispanic community, but all communities who have a hard time getting access to broadband. So that's one of the ones I'm working on. I do also have the bill S as in Sam, B for 798 that's going to allow seniors, disabled, and homeless individuals to be able to use their SNAP funds for hot meals. So that's if SNAP is the same as like food stamps. So they'll be able to use those to get hot meals. So it helps those people that don't have access to cook their own hot meals. They give them a way to receive hot meals in Missouri for those that participate in that program, for restaurants that participate in that program. I don't have a bill for this, but there's a creek in our area called Moline Creek, Maline, that's causing erosion to homes in my district. Not the homes, but the yards in the district. So I'm working with the governor's office and the budget committees and the appropriations committee, trying to get funding to take care of, to stop the erosion so that these homes won't end up into the creek. I'm also working with an organization called the Covering House. They help sex trafficked and exploited children. So we're trying to get them funding. They currently are only able to house 5 victims, but they've been gifted a home that would allow them to take in more victims, but it needs a lot of renovations. So I've contacted some people on the budget committee and appropriations committee for that as well, to get them funding to get that taken care of. So those are some things that I'm working on in my office.
Well, thank you, Senator Mosley. We know that those are the grassroots efforts that have to get done in our communities. When you bring it down to people actually living day by day with a lot of these problems and issues, they have to have a champion to help them out with those things. Because, for example, you talked about the creek. Well, that might not be a big priority for a lot of communities, but for that particular community and those homeowners, it is a scary thing to think that their house is going to end up sliding down a hill. I can imagine. And for the home that you just talked about, that is also something for that community to address before it can become a bigger problem. And you multiply those little community issues that you have throughout all our communities in Missouri, and you see that there's a lot of work that needs to get done. And I applaud you for doing that. Just a little background with Senator Mosley. Senator Mosley, both Angela and Jay have collaborated with the Hispanic Leaders Group now for a few years. We've done things like vaccine events and pop-ups. They have participated in some of the fundraising for our Hispanic Scholarship Alliance, musical trivia. They have shared time with us in Jefferson City at Bones, and we had a great time. So they're very down to earth, and they're very accessible. And we want to be able to support you guys in what you're doing in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. So you can always count on the Hispanic Leaders Group to collaborate also with you, just like you have collaborated with us. In the last couple of years, we've collaborated with the census and then with the pandemic. And it's been great. It's really been something exemplary to have you come to our community and be with us. And I appreciate that. And thank you very, very much. And tell Jay he's got one demerit for not getting on the call on time. But right now, no, we love him. It's 3:59 according to my computer watch. And if anybody has any other questions, now is the time to ask in the chat or raise your virtual hand like this, and Maria can call you and unmute you.
Before Republican Shaw departs, I would just wanted to share a couple of questions that related to the obstacles that having, ID with picture causes. One of them is that low-income individuals have difficult getting this ID due to cost, because it costs them money when they have to take off pay time from work, and also the fact that there is transportation issues for many of them.
Right, and through the last few hearings we've had on that, it has been an issue. We understand that. And rather than look at not passing photo ID, I believe in our last committee meeting, I suggested that we work together to figure out how we can ensure that everyone gets an ID, so that we can, because the IDs are required for other things as well. So it shouldn't just be the photo for election purposes. We should figure out how we can help them get IDs for other purposes to make their life easier. And if there's a way we can do it, I know my office has helped several. The Secretary of State can do that as well. I think we should focus on how we can get people IDs rather than possibly stopping the photo ID on itself. So I think it's a reasonable ask to have a photo ID for elections, but I also understand it's a concern of getting it and finding the time to get it. And I would welcome anybody's ideas on how to get that done so we can get that done. We've just been called back to the floor. We're going back into session here. I just heard the bell, and I'm sure the other representative will want to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Yep, I'm going to hop off, so we're going to head back into session. But thank you for having us today.
Thank you all. And one parting statement. Our goal is to have an open channel with legislators involved in the redistricting process to ensure fair and uninterrupted access to legal voting in Missouri. We will follow up with this request. As for our opportunity to effectively address our concern, we will work together for a better, more inclusive Missouri. So Representative Shaw, expect a follow-up. Thank you so much. Get on. I know you got to get to work.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
More work.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, y'all. The delegates can stay on the line with me if you have any questions or any remarks that I may need to take some notes for you, but I will commit to following up with Representative Shaw to request a future meeting with some of our stakeholders for this redistricting.
Hey, Tony.
Yes.
This is Sal. I'm sorry.
Sal.
I had my hand up. I don't know if you saw it.
Oh, yes, you did.
I find it interesting that the conversation from Representative Schultz moved from voting integrity of the system to, what we want is everybody to have an ID. I mean, he totally flipped on that argument. And so I think we do need to engage with folks like Denise Lieberman and other advocates to press them on that rationale. And I hope this was recorded, because I'd like to see us revisit this issue and we have the statements from the participants on this issue.
It was recorded.
And I would ask everybody that it has any pending questions or comments that they wish to address to the panelists to go ahead and put them in the chat or contact one of us. So in turn, we can share with the panelists. And because I know within our time, it is very limited to be able to address some of the concerns that we all have with, again, with this short allowed time.
Yes. So I got a technical question for Maria or Vic. when people put the question in the chat and we have a recording and we see the recording and we're able to see the chat questions.
Yes. They can see the questions.
Okay, so afterwards I can see the question.
And I'm trying to also put in some in Spanish, some recommendations as to what the attendees have to do in Spanish.
So our action item from this particular session is to revisit with our representatives and Representative Dan Shaw, this redistricting issue, especially the issue about voter ID. For what I understand right now, there's other forms of ID that you can use for voter registration or for voting when you get there. There are other, now Denise, are you still on the line?
I don't think she is anymore.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, I think she hopped out.
I was hoping she can address us and do some fact checking there. But anybody else has anything to say? Well, not having anybody else wanting to comment, we will now adjourn the meeting and see you guys, same bat channel, same bat time tomorrow.
And I just want to mention that this is recorded and it will be posted in through YouTube. So do visit our website and you can see all the three sessions that we're having. They will be posted in our website and under a YouTube channel. So it is something that you can revisit it. Thank you.
Oh, I have a question for Vic.
He cannot communicate with you.
Vic, te tengo una pregunta.
I can't communicate with you, Tony.
Vic, te tengo una pregunta.
Tony.
¿Me oyes? Sí. ¿Cuánta gente
Yes, we can hear you.
¿Cuánta gente seleccionaron el lenguaje en español? No. Okay. Okay, gracias. Okay, so I switched to Spanish and I asked Vic if how many people selected the Spanish and how many people were listening to the interpretation. He said he cannot see that.
And I'm trying to see if I can see that, but I can't, but I will look at it under the recording. So thank you again to everybody for joining us. It's been, remember, we will be here tomorrow, same time, 3 o'clock. And I'm so excited because tomorrow will be all about health.
Yes, and I get to keep quiet. Bye, adios.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Sam.
Take care.